Most people know Stoicism through the great Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, but what most people do not know is that he was influenced by the Stoic teachings of another. Meet Epictetus, a Stoic slave who lived during the time of Emperor Nero. His influence on Marcus Aurelius was a hallmark of Stoic philosophy and history. Being nothing more than just a slave, Epictetus was a man who had simply a pen and paper to his name. For this reason, I would like to go in depth on the life and philosophy of one of the great Stoics, Epictetus. Before I discuss the life of Epictetus, I first have to discuss the time period he was in. We begin in the Hellenistic Age, an era of philosophy comprised of many different schools of thought, starting from the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC to the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. The dominant schools of this period were the Stoics, Epicureans, and Skeptics. The Stoic school was the most notable during this age, and among the Stoics was Epictetus. Epictetus was born in 55 AD and was originally a slave from Hierapolis in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. He would refer himself to a lame man due to his disability of a broken leg. Epictetus was Epictetus' master, who rose to the position of Emperor Nero's secretary. So with his equivocal position, Epictetus got the best of both worlds. A slave on one hand, but also a privileged member of the emperor's inner circle. Epictetus came to appreciate the full ambiguities of power and learn to distinguish real freedom from counterfeit. This dialect of freedom and slavery colors much of his presentation of Stoic thought. In his writing discourses, Epictetus concentrates on ethics and logic, how to apply ethics and logic to one's own life. Epictetus has a plain and practical agenda. He warns his students to make a clean break with received patterns of thinking and behaving, to reject popular morality and put conventional notions of good and bad behind them. In short, his aim was to inspire his readers to something like a religious conversion, not only by appeal to any articles of faith or the promises of life in the hereafter, but by appeal to a reason alone. Epictetus granted Epictetus his freedom, but from then on, Epictetus devoted his life to practice and preaching of philosophy. Tradition has it that late in life, Epictetus retired from teaching and withdrew to the peace and quiet of family life, under conditions imposed by old age. 1. He became a parent by adopting rather than fathering a child. And 2. Took into a home a female servant to serve as a kind of surrogate mother to the child and domestic servant for himself. Epictetus regarded philosophy as a jealous mistress who demanded practically all his time and attention. He evidently thought he earned the comforts of home after devoting most of his life to improving the lives of others, the successive generation of students who passed through his school. After creating this version of a family, Epictetus was evidently content to settle into it and live out the balance of his years in obscurity, and died in 135 AD. Most of the world knows what Stoicism is, but to those who aren't familiar with the school, Stoicism was founded in the 3rd century BC by Zeno of Citium. The core principles of Stoic ethics are wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Epicureans insist that heaven is unconcerned with our birth and death, is unconcerned, in fact, with human beings generally. The result that good people suffer while wicked people thrive. The Stoics disagree, maintaining that although things happen according to fate, this depends not on the movement of planets, but on the principles and logic of natural causality. Stoicism concedes to us the freedom to choose our own lives. Once the choice is made, the Stoics warn the subsequent sequence of events cannot be altered. With regard to practical matters, they maintain the popular ideas of good and bad are wrong. Many people who appear to be in dire circumstances are actually happy provided they deal with their situation bravely. Others, regardless of how many possessions they have, are miserable because they do not know how to use the gifts of fortune wisely. The Stoic school leaves us free to choose our own lives. It is up to us how we act, and we are responsible for determining the character and content of our lives. Stoic morality is cited as no one does wrong willingly, that harming another hurts the offender rather than the injured. Partly that material goods can do as much harm as good and should therefore be classified as value neutral. Stoics emphasize rationality, the logos, as man's characteristic quality. This is how Epictetus drew his audience through rational argument. Epictetus emphasized repeatedly that our thoughts and actions have immediate and inescapable consequences. You have only to doze for a moment and all is lost, for ruin and salvation both have their source inside you. Very little is needed for everything to be upset and ruined, only a slight lapse in reason. Humans do have freedom to shape mental events. He believes we have no other goal but moral improvement and that humans are capable of moral progress. So what have I learned from reading Epictetus' work? I have gained 3 points as to what Epictetus has taught me on Stoicism and his learning system. 1. What is within our control and what is not. 2. Freedom. 3. We seek external validation and/or approval from others. In Book 1, Section 12, on satisfaction, here are the key points I have made when reading this section. Education should be approached with this goal in mind. How can I personally follow the gods always? And how can I adapt to God's government and so be free? Freedom, you see, is having events go in accordance with our will, never contrary to it. Freedom is something good and valuable. Getting an education means learning to bring our will in line with the way things happen, which is to say, as the ruler of the universe arranged. And I quote, "He arranged for there to be summer and winter, abundance and lack, virtue and vice, all such opposites meant for the harmony of the whole. And he gave us each a body and bodily parts, material belongings, family and friends. It is with this arrangement in mind that we should approach instruction in order to learn the nature of what concerns us and keep our will in line with events. When you are by yourself, you should call it peace and liberty, and consider yourself the God's equal. When you're with a large group, you shouldn't say you're in a mob or crowd, but a guest at a festival or feast, and in that spirit, learn to enjoy it. You should thank the gods for making you strong enough to survive what you cannot control, and only responsible for what you can. The gods have released you from accountability from your parents, your siblings, your body, your possessions, for death and for life itself. They made you responsible only for what is in your power, the proper use of impressions. So why take on the burden of matters which you cannot answer for? You are only making unnecessary problems for yourself." Here in Book 4, Section 1, Epictetus explains on freedom. Free is the person who lives as he wishes and cannot be coerced, impeded, or compelled, whose impulses cannot be thwarted, who always gets what he desires and never has to experience what he would rather avoid. No one wants to go through life ignorant of how to achieve their freedom, nor live with delusion and prejudice, being unjust, undisciplined, mean, and ungrateful. No bad person then lives the way he wants, and no one wants to live life experiencing sadness, envy, and pity, being frustrated in their desires and liable to experience what they want to avoid. So, doesn't it seem to you that acting against one's will, under protest and compulsion, is tantamount to being a slave? No one has power to compel you. We're all free, but we don't need to boast about it. But what of the passions such as lust and anxiety? We can overcome them by suppressing them. Then we can really detest how free we really are. The easier the life, the more slavish it is, Epictetus writes. Hard choices now, easy life later. Easy choices now, hard life later. The birds above us, when they are caught and raised in a cage, will try anything for the sake of escape. Some starve to death rather than endure their condition. Those that survive, barely, grudgingly, wasting away, fly off in an instant when they find the least little opening to squeeze through. So great is their need for their native freedom, so strong the desire to be independent and unconfined. Well, what's wrong with you here in your cage? You can ask. I was born to fly wherever I like, to live in the open air, to sing whenever I want. You take all this away from me, and then you say, what's wrong with you? A foolish thing to say. We are meant to be free. So the real question is asked, would you rather choose death or endure through great suffering for freedom? As human beings, we all want the same end in life, to live in peace, to be happy, to do as we like, and never be foiled or forced to act against our wishes. Nature has endowed us with resources to discover the truth and our freedom. Whoever has the means to give or take away any of the things he values is our master. When we love, hate, or fear such things, then the people who administer them are bound to become our masters. What is it then that renders a person free and independent? Everything under our control, Epictetus writes. Our judgments, desires, aversions, our will. It is not within our power to have our body perform perfectly whenever you want. The body can become sick, injured, or lose a bodily part, such as an arm or a leg. For example, he writes, your arm isn't exactly yours, a part of your body, but by nature it is dirt, subject to restraint and main force, a slave to anything physically stronger. Your will is your own business. You cannot be forced by anyone to desire something against your will. You will never be free if you always continue to chase for control. When you lose things, do not be angry. Think to yourself that you've returned them. Still continuing on what lies within our control and our freedom, I read from fragments 3 and 8. Everything obeys and serves the universe, the land and sea, the sun and other stars, as well as the world's plants and animals. Our body also obeys it in both sickness and health, whichever it dictates, in youth and old age, and in the course of the body's other changes. So it is unreasonable that our will, which is in our power, be the only thing to try to resist it. It is stronger than we are, and very powerful indeed. Besides, it has planned for us better than we could ourselves by including us in its grand design. Resistance is vain in any case. It only leads to useless struggle while inviting grief and sorrow. The nature of the universe was, is, and always will be the same, and things cannot happen any differently than they do now. It's not just mankind and the other animals on Earth that share in the cycle of change, but also the heavens and even the 4 basic elements. Up and down, they change and alternate, Earth becoming water, water, air, and air in turn becoming fire, with the analogous change from above downwards. If we try to adapt our mind to the regular sequence of changes and accept the inevitable with good grace, our life will produce quite smoothly and harmoniously. And now I read from the Enchiridion, or the Manual. Chapter 8. Don't hope that events will turn out the way that you want. Welcome events in whichever way they happen. This is the path to peace. Chapter 10. Remember the resources you have within you to cope with it. You will discover within you the contrary power of self-restraint. Faced with pain, you will discover the power of endurance. If you are insulted, you will discover patience. You will grow to be confident that you have the moral means to tolerate. Chapter 15. Remember to always act as if you are at a symposium, sophisticated and well-mannered. When the food or drink comes around, reach out and take some politely. If it passes you by, don't try pulling it back. And if it has not reached you yet, don't let your desire run ahead of you. Be patient until your turn comes. Adopt a similar attitude with regard to children, wife, wealth, and status, and in time, you will be entitled to dine with the gods. Go further and decline these goods even when they are on offer, and you will have a share in the gods' power as well as their company. That is how Diogenes, Heraclitus, and philosophers like them came to be called and considered divine. Here, what I gained is be patient and prudent with your words and actions. And lastly, chapter 23. If you are ever tempted to look outside for approval, realize that you have compromised your integrity. So be satisfied just being a philosopher. And if you need a witness in addition, be your own, and you will be all the witness you could desire. Never look outside yourself for approval. Realize that you're all that you need to satisfy your integrity and character. Epictetus lays emphasis on the importance of freedom from the world and highlights human status as agents, who through their ultimate independence are responsible for their own happiness independent of others. We must not become attached to material things, because they will be invariably be taken away from us. If you wish to make progress, aim towards something good, because progress is always an approach towards virtue. But what is the goal of virtue? A life that flows smoothly and with nature. Make it your goal never to fail in your desires, or experience things you would rather avoid. Aim to be perfect, also in the intention of withholding judgment. Don't put your purpose in one place and expect to see progress made somewhere else. True progress is when you spend every waking moment doing what you're meant to do and following your craft and or passion. Externals, which lie outside our power, are not man's proper concern, but will enable him to live a troubled life and rid him of peace of mind. Epictetus believes that God gave man the means to fulfill all his obligations, that these means are within his power, that happiness is attained through that we are capable of, this being the reason God gave them to us. Our mind cannot be forced to believe what is false, nor our will compelled to love something that makes it unhappy. These two powers are therefore free, and it is through them that we can become perfect. It is not the events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them. Enchiridion 5.